Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prizepicks and the Gametime app.
And welcome into Bruins Beat, presented by Prizepicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. And we're presented by Gametime. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms, they apply. I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. We're almost into February. We're almost out of January. I got to say, I picked up a new game habit, a new game I've been really into. It's called GeoGuessr. Have you ever played it?
No. I don't even know what the hell that is.
It is
a TikTok dance or something? Or?
No. This actually is. I look. I'm a brain. I'm into the brain rot stuff. I'm a TikTok guy. I can admit it. But GeoGuessr, I don't know, listeners. I'd be very interested to hear if you guys are into it as well, because I'm freaking into it. They drop you into a random location anywhere in the world, and you have to guess where you are. And you click around and look at clues and see what the street signs say and this and that. I was playing it this weekend and it was a freaking blast.
You get dropped down, all of a sudden you look around like on the Google Maps thing, and it's like, oh my god, it's Kowloon. Like, I know where I am.
I know exactly where I am. This is
yes.
This is TD Garden.
Yes.
But so that was what I was up to this weekend. Bruins were up to something this weekend. 3-1 win over the Colorado Avalanche. Another game where they get outshot, outplayed, outskated, still find a way to win. Quietly 5-1-1 in their last 7. I said this to Diver on Friday. They've low-key been rolling. And I even saw The Athletic came out with a story on Monday saying that they should still be sellers, and they even had a category of there's these teams are in the middle, like the Blue Jackets, the Sabres I think were even in the middle. Bruins were fully sellers to them, and we've talked about them as sellers for quite a while. But again, 5-1-1. Geekie and Pastrnak are rolling. I also want to say one thing before we start. Congratulations to Charlie McAvoy and his wife Kylie for the birth of their son, Rhys Michael McAvoy. Or is it Reese? Reese. Okay, Reese. Yeah, Rhys Hoskins. That's right.
Yes.
So Reese Michael McAvoy, a future NHL player. We'll probably be covering him at the New England Hockey Journal in 14 years. So that'll be great. But congratulations to them. But Bruins get this win. Does that change how you feel about this team at all?
No, not yet. No, I'm still, until this team goes on 11 wins in 12 games or something. And it also goes to show how I think done with it and how disgusted all of us were off of that friggin' loss to the Ottawa Senators, that if they win that game, I'm sure honestly my complexion changes. The game last week against the Devils was not good. Game really got away from them. That was really frustrating. They've had a lot of those, but if you hold on, come back, and you beat the Senators on the road in that game, take care of business, maybe I am feeling a little bit better about this team. That the talk of the Bruins being sellers completely, I'd probably push back against it, and I'm still not. Don't know how far this team is going to go in terms of if they are moving off pieces, but this is still a team that needs to show a whole lot more to convince me, or I think a lot of people, that they're not either looking at us, a retool, or that they should stay status quo or anything like that. You can look at the fact they've got McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm getting closer and closer to a return. Both those guys could be playing by the end of this week, maybe by next week before the break, something like that, which would be a huge step in the right direction for this team, obviously. But until they can go on a little bit of a run here, I still have question marks. Even the game against Colorado, and again, full credit to the Bruins for taking care of business in that game against a team with a lot of skill, a lot of talent, a couple of new faces, obviously. But the first 40 minutes of that game, it felt like another one of those here we go again, where Bruins did not have their legs. Granted, they played a lot this week, but didn't have their legs against a very skilled team. Didn't look like they were on the same tier of what Colorado was bringing in that game. And then credit to them, they find a way to win, right? The Pastrnak and Geekie, that line with Zacha has continued to be money for this team. They've kind of been the cheat code the Bruins need, because a lot of the team is still kind of misfiring offensively. You get a great bounce back game from Jeremy Swayman after missing a game because of upper body injury. So listen, like they took care of business. They came back and won that game. Didn't give up a late goal. It's a lot of kind of white knuckle wins right now, but the Bruins are showing that they're not imploding. And I don't think that's ever been an issue with this team, even though like a lot has not gone right for them, that they're mailing it in or going through the motions, anything like that. Just the roster is what it is. And is it good enough right now to make me think that, yes, they've got a deep run on them? Right now, I'm not going there yet, but they are showing that they can fight and compete. But I think the jury is still out in terms of just what this team is. Or maybe we already know. Maybe you think that they are what they are and you're not falling for it either. But I'm not going there just yet in terms of thinking that this is the start of second half run or anything like that.
They're winning the cup. This is official.
Okay.
They're winning the Stanley Cup.
Let's clip that. Yeah.
Lock it in. The Bruins 2025 Stanley Cup winners. I think this goes along with what we talked about earlier in the year, where it's like, oh, look what happens when David Pastrnak is playing well. Look what happens when Jeremy Swayman is playing well. Swayman, for the most part, has played really well these last couple of weeks. David Pastrnak just won number 1 star of the week. I think he won number 3 the week before. Like, he's been humming. We can get into that in a bit. But let's also pour some cold water on this. This 5-1-1 stretch came after a stretch of 6 straight losses. This top line of Geekie, Pastrnak, and Zacha is great, and we'll get into that more, and they deserve a lot of praise. But is that line going to carry you through the rest of the season and through the playoffs? Likely no. Like, I think they continue to roll, and they've clearly been your best line offensively. I mean, it's not even remotely close. It's been those 3 guys doing pretty much all the production. But that's not sustainable. We saw that with Bergeron, Marchand, and Pastrnak back in the day. That wasn't sustainable either, to going deep. So I think your top guys are playing like your top guys, which is great. That being said, you're still getting outshot by other teams. You're still getting outskated, outplayed. You're hanging on to win. Like, they've been resilient. They've been resilient. Like, I'm not pouring cold water on that. They're a resilient team. They're not saying die. Good on them. You heard Nikita Zadorov the other day after Saturday's loss. Oh, we hear what you guys are saying, this and that. And good, use this motivation.
Specifically, he pulled out a little sheet of paper and it was printed. It was folded like all the way, opened it, and it was a picture of your face.
That's right.
Being like this with a microphone in front of you. He was like, "Who is this guy?
Who is he?
I was like,
who is he?"
I didn't say anything. I don't want to say anything. Get us in trouble. But
thank you for not outing me on that. I don't know. I don't want to face him.
You can't just go on YouTube and see what your name is. But
no.
This at all times. But
the Bruins have different things. They don't have the same website privileges that we have. They're a strict YouTube diet. Don Sweeney will not allow them to watch more than 10 minutes of YouTube. Can't say who these people are. They blare out our names. No. All that stuff. And again, like, it's a good thing to say. I mean, the Bruins for this entire season have said the right things pretty much. That's the other thing. Like, they know what to say. But again, like, I wonder, like, obviously I'm not sold. You're not sold. But I'm guessing that Don Sweeney and the front office want reasons to be sold. They want to they want to buy at the deadline. They don't want to sell. No, first of all, no team ever wants to sell. But they really don't want to sell. We've talked about this a number of times. Playoffs are a big barometer for them. Spent a lot of money in the offseason. High expectations for this team. You and I had high expectations for this team. And I think a lot of fans did too. And I think they want to see it through. They want to see what this team, especially Zadorov and Lindholm, can do in the playoffs. I don't blame them so much for that. But I think the writing's still on the wall. They would need to continue this over their next 7 games, because really the last month has been a continuation of what they've been all year, which is inconsistent. You lose 6 straight, you win 5 of 7. Like, would it shock you if they lost 3 of their next 4? No, it wouldn't. That's right. That'd be tough. That would be very tough for people to swallow. But I do wonder if they're wavering up there, if they're thinking, hey, this is a good excuse to try to buy. I mean, we hear about them being in as dark horses on JT Miller. We'll get into trade stuff later. But I do wonder if this starts to convince them maybe not to sell. I don't think that's the right thing, by the way. I don't think that's the right thing.
I mean, there's so many different ways you can kind of chart out the path going forward. I think the worst case scenario is like the one that I think, however you want to paint it, a lot of people are like, don't do that, is like the short-term rentals or giving up a first-round pick for a guy who's here for a year or 2 or something like that, just to even if it addresses a clear need right now, right? Of like you know, I'm trying to think of just a player that is like a rental, like Jason Zucker, who's had a really good year for Buffalo, right? But like if he's going to cost you like a first or something like that, I don't know if that's even
No
going to be the
thanks.
case, but for a guy that is, what is he, 32, 33, expiring deal, that's not moving the needle. Yes, you could use a guy like that. Like this team, even if you can make the case they're short, two top six players, like two top six wings and a centerman, right? Like,
Yeah. When you put it
again,
like that.
yeah. Again, one guy could help you out there. Like if it adds more scoring punch to another line, so it's not any team with Barkov or John Tavares or Matthews can't just lock down the Geekie Pastrnak Zaka line and be good. Like another scorer can help you, obviously, but I think the worst case scenario is that a short term gain that is not for the long haul, that follows the same script of relinquishing draft capital or younger players or what have you. Um, Again, I think you could also paint a picture where the Bruins look at who's delivering for them right now and still kind of kill two birds with one stone of selling off pieces, getting draft capital, and still putting yourself in a spot where you don't bottom out. Like they could potentially move a guy like a Frederick or like a Peak or someone like that, and like still be in the mix for a playoff like spot. If like Pastrnak and Swayman and these guys are playing at a high level, not saying it's a guarantee, but that almost feels like could be like one of the situations where everyone's placated. You still get into the playoffs. You still excite the fans. You never know what can happen, in a first round, even though they're not going to be favored there. But you're also not completely punting on the air. You're not trading, Coyle or Kahlo or someone like that.
Marchand.
Marchand and really bottoming out. And maybe that's, just doing maybe it's more of a half measure of trading like a Frederick or a Peak or something like that. And you get some draft capital, but it's not moving the needle or accelerating your timeline enough that would be the case if you were trading a Marchand or a Coyle or a Kahlo, someone like that. But you can, placate a couple different groups in terms of you are a soft seller, but you remain competitive, right? Maybe that's enough for what this team is. Or maybe they look at this team too, and if you are looking to buy add to this team, it has to be something where you're shaking things up, right? You are acquiring JT Miller, and we can talk about whether that's a guy worth investing in. But in terms of what he could provide, like, yes, he's a great player, bit of a cage rattler, would help your team out tremendously, right? But is not going to be a 6-7 year franchise cornerstone. He'll be here because of that contract, but do you want to get tied up? But do you want to get tied up into a player like that who, I'm not saying I think like JT Miller, you trade for him, he's going to bottom out next year. I think he can still be like a 60, 70 point player for the next couple of years, if not more. Like he is a guy that has that skill set and can help you out tremendously the next couple of years. But is that wise for a player like that when you look at the money and the age, stuff like that? So the Bruins have tough decisions to make. I think the one thing, though, is the short-term rentals or standing pat. I just don't think that's going to fly. You got to do something. You have to pick a path. And I think, retooling is probably the smartest plan, but I also could see the Bruins looking at, if it's acquiring a player with term and it involves moving money out, shaking things up, moving players out that maybe aren't for the long term, and you can kind of do that, I'm sure the Bruins are very, very tempted at looking at a plan like that, especially if they continue to pile on some wins here and try to claw back into, the odds of where they are in terms of making the playoffs.
Well, that's the thing, is like, I think you can do a happy medium if you want. Now, I think a lot of people would say that's a bad idea. Go one way or the other. Don't stay in the middle. But you can sell off a Frederick or a Peak and still make the playoffs. I mean, the Atlantic, the Lightning have been horrible against the division. I think they're 3-9 this year against the Atlantic, which, again, that's not going to, they're also teetering. They're another team that's, it's right now as of Monday at 2:30 p.m. It's the Bruins and the Lightning in the wild card. So I think right now you could sell some guys and still be in the mix down the stretch. You know what keeps you always in the mix, though, Connor? Always has you there is Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long over at Prizepicks. The big game is almost here. It's almost here. 2 weeks from now. We know the matchup. Chiefs Eagles, like it was 2 years ago, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prizepicks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prizepicks is also giving away a free pick for the big game, where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw 1 single yard to win. I'm pretty sure one of Jalen Hurts and or probably Patrick Mahomes will throw more than 1 yard to win. So if you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win that cold hard cash. Bruins-wise, David Pastrnak, good one. Morgan Geekie, great one. Swayman saves, getting a lot of shots on net. He's another good one. So download the app today and use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. Run your game. Hard to run an earthquake. Did you feel that one on Monday?
No, not at all. I
didn't feel it either. I was so disappointed.
I think people were overreacting.
I don't think it happened. That's my conspiracy. I think people were just imagining stuff. I didn't feel it. One of my roommates was like, "Did you guys feel that?" I was like, "No." Granted, I was paying my student loans at the time, so I was a little focused on something.
Yeah, you were locked in.
couldn't really focus on anything else. But yeah, I didn't feel it at all. I know that like everybody was, texting in group chats like, "Oh my god, I felt that." Like the whole house shook. So maybe it was real. Maybe, but maybe it was fake. It was just some people felt it, others didn't. Who knows?
I dropped my Stanley, and I think that caused the earthquake. So
it's a crater in the floor where that thing fell.
Exactly.
God damn, those things are huge. Morgan Geekie's been on fire. And Pasternak's playmaking has been absurd. He's confident with the puck again. He's shooting, but he's also just those subtle no-look passes that get defenders to bite. Because I do think, you have to respect when he comes around the net and he opens up his hips. It's like, all right, well, if you're the defenseman right there, you do kind of have to anticipate he's going to shoot. And he does that little touch pass that throws everybody off, and Geekie's right at that back post to tip it in. And we've seen it a lot. And we see it off the rush. It's been just at such a high level, but Geekie's really benefited from it. Again, I think there's only 5 guys who've scored more goals than him in the last stretch of games or in the last month. It's an absurd statistic.
And it's all star players, right? It's all like star players. It's like Kucherov or McKinnon or something like that. And then I think it's like Ricard Raquel's in there too. So I don't know what he's doing.
That's right. I saw Ricard Raquel.
But again, like he's a solid player, top 6 player, but definitely a few outliers, I would say, but Geekie's put himself in pretty good company over these last month plus, honestly.
Raquel's like one of the all-time potential
Bruins. Yeah,
she's
up
there for trade deadlines and stuff. But one thing, obviously, that a lot of people are debating and talking about is, should Morgan Geekie be re-signed or should you trade him with his value at his peak? And I think there's a legit argument to trading him. I get it. You want to get a lot for him, and I think that's valid. But Bruins don't have much depth on the wings. After David Pastrnak, there is not a heck of a lot for the next 3 to 4 years. Marchand, I assume, will re-sign. Let's say it's a 3-year deal, but how many of those 3 years is he going to be a top 6, second on the team in point-getting guy? Geekie seems to be able to produce with top guys. He fits anywhere. He gives you a good stopgap on the wings. You pretty much know what you're going to get, especially if you put him with top guys. And the money's not going to be crazy. We saw the contract projection. It was what, 3.4 million. I think it's going to be a lot more.
I think it was 3.125, wasn't it? Wasn't it something crazy like that?
It's something around there, and it was absurd. Yeah. And I think it's more. I think he's well earned the right to make $4.5 million. But I take that. I do. You don't have a lot of sure bets on this team going forward. I think he's a good stopgap, and he works with your highest paid guy. He works with him. Those two work great together on the wings. You can probably get a good amount for him, but I like what he's giving you, and I'm not ready to give it up. So I re-sign him. What about you?
Yeah, it's a tough call, Evan, because I think you can make a compelling argument for both keeping him and selling high on a player that This is a team that looks at his versatility, at his ability to play up in the lineup. His age, he's 26. He's going to be an RFA, so you have some control of the player there. Like, is he a guy that gets you a first round pick or a prospect or something like that? Like, that's pretty tempting, right?
That's hard to deny too. Like, that's hard to be like,
Yeah.
no.
But as you said, I think when you're looking at this team, and yes, this team could be looking at a retool and really reshuffling, significant stretches of the roster around this offseason. But I look at guys who have underperformed or guys who aren't doing enough or players that are kind of square pegs and round holes. I think a guy like Geekie, especially for the fact you have, at his age, with the team control, with his versatility, he's a guy that I would be more than comfortable giving that money to in terms of like, is he right now? He's already proved that he can be a top line player with David Pastrnak. You have that chemistry there. He's a guy that is, I think, underrated in terms of his physicality. Like, you saw he played well in the playoffs last year, piles up a lot of hits, even if he's not like the most imposing guy out there. So he's a solid, good player. And honestly, like solid, useful players, you don't have a lot of them right now in your forward grouping right now. And again, like if you see what he does right now with Pastrnak, and let's say you get JT Miller or someone else this offseason, what have you, and he gets bumped down the lineup, he can still be a impactful second line player or an impactful third line player too. Like I think he can offer value kind of wherever he is in the lineup. If you do have like a ways to elevate kind of the ceiling of your top line with Pastrnak and Zacha and whoever that kind of grouping is. So I think when you look at guys behind Pastrnak and Marchand, who's going to be up there in age, signing a guy like Geekie, who can play all over the lineup, is still young. Again, not expecting him to maybe take like the Zacha leap, right, of being a guy that, hey, like, let's see if he can get 60 points. Like, I don't know if you're getting that from him, but a guy who can kind of play on the wing, is physical, can play down the middle. He was legit your top line center at the end of that Florida series.
That's right.
I think for what the value is for a guy, at his age and with a contract that may not even be over $4 million. We'll see kind of what the final projections are and what his numbers are. But that's a guy I'd be comfortable giving money to and keeping him as part of this revamped roster, because I think he's earned his spot and I think he can help you wherever you kind of put him in the lineup.
Yeah, it also sends a weird message when you have a guy like that who has legitimately, improved, done the right things over the last 2 years. And it's like, all right, well, goodbye. Like, I do think that can rub people the wrong way. Like you mentioned next season, and I was just kind of jotting down a line, the first 2 lines for next season. And barring a insane trade, barring a big trade, which could happen. I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, I wouldn't be shocked if they did some legitimate moves or do they trade Marchand? I don't know. But let's just say things kind of continue as status quo. And I think this is where people be like, oh, but as realistically, their top 6 next year would be Geekie, Zacha, Pastrnak, Marchand, Lindholm, ? And your question mark would be, who is that second line right wing or that second line wing, however you want to divvy it up, right? I think Geekie helps you in the sense that you know what you have going into next year. You should at least. I mean, we thought that about Zacha and Coyle coming into this year, and we thought that about a lot of guys going into this year, but you seem to know what you have in Geekie. There seems to be a legitimate chemistry with Zacha and Pastrnak, and I'm not saying don't make the big trade. I'm with you. If you get a huge package deal for Morgan Geekie, it's hard not to take it. In the offseason, try to revamp this team with a legitimate trade. I'm completely on that. But if they don't, and they re-sign Geekie and they re-sign Marchand, you do only have one big question mark on the wing. Now, are you comfortable with Zacha and Lindholm as your 1 and 2? Seems like you're back where you were last offseason, and that seems to be where you'd make the move. You'd try to go out and get a winger in the offseason like a Brock Besser. But if you let Geekie go, if you trade Geekie, you got to go out and get 2, potentially 3 wingers in free agency, and that is dangerous. That's not good. We don't like a ton of action in free agency. Go out, get 1. You start to get 2 or 3 of the same position. So when you start to devote a lot of money to guys who you don't know if they're going to fit or not. So I'd rather you go out and get 1 winger who you're sure of. If you think Brock Besser's going to come in and fit great with Brad Marchand or Elias Lindholm or something, then sure. But Geekie gives you a sure bet. You know what you're getting there. So yeah, good for Geekie for the last couple months. He's been
really
rolling.
well. He's making the smart plays. This guy that was literally scratched, 5 out of the first 20 games for the team. Wasn't moving his feet. And it's not saying he's a speed demon out there, but he's a smart player. Like he makes the small plays, puts himself in the right spots for a guy like Pastrnak. And I think even on the Nesson, unobstructed views, when they had like Krejci on, he was saying that Pasternak's a guy that, yes, like his skill stands out. He can elevate a lot of guys around him, but he's at his best when he's playing with smart players. And I think you see that with a guy like Zacha, who sometimes has a lot of plays that goes under the radar. And I think you see it with a guy like Geekie, who goes to the net front, is physical, wins puck battles, and puts himself in spots. I don't think they're cashing in on the rush every single time or what have you. Like Geekie, I think, is been giving a good opportunity, and he's made the most of it. So yeah, it's good to see him kind of get on a roll here.
Underrated shot too.
Yeah,
scores from distance, which it's hard to do in the NHL. If you want to go to the game, you want to see Morgan Geekie in action. Get the Geekie jersey. Maybe you could do a jersey instead. It's a little cheaper. Shirt. Yeah, Geek Squad shirt. You got to go to our friends over at Gametime. It's a weird time of year. We're entering February. It's still kind of the dog days, but go to a game before Four Nations starts, or go to Four Nations. I don't know. Do what you want, and use our friends over at Gametime, because Gametime has their amazing feature called Gametime Picks. I can't say enough about it because it makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. There's a lot. All-in pricing. You're not crushed by fees at checkout. That's the worst. Ruins it. It's like, do I really want to go to this game if I have to pay an extra $20? Nope. Not at Gametime. Or actually, you don't get it at Gametime because Gametime shows it to you up front, which is all you really want. Lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. I can't read today. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Connor, what time is it?
Gametime.
Per source, it's Gametime. So big NHL news happened over the weekend. Didn't involve the Bruins, but crazy Friday night. You were at BUBC. That was not going so hot for you, unfortunately. Were you covering that game, or did you go as a fan?
I was covering that game, yes.
Nice.
Wasn't great. Wasn't what I was.
Sorry about that.
Was not ideally what I was looking for there. It's also unfortunate that the BU goalie, the new one they brought in, can't go for little jaunts for a warm up. Can't take the beautiful ice at Silvio Conti Forum without getting a penalty slapped in his face. So
that was nuts. Oh my God, that is overreach. There's no reason. I think if you said to BC, like, do you want this penalty? They'd be like, I mean, in reality, no. Like, this should not be a penalty. You texted me this during that BUBC game on Friday. Teddy Stiga can play. That kid is freaking.
He is unreal. Yeah, he's a really good player. I noticed like guys like him, like more than like Hagens, but he's not saying that. I think like, Hagens is a bust. I remember the first game last year. BU played Quinnipiac at Aganis, and a lot of like other guys like Green was really good. Hudson was great, obviously. But like Celebrini actually had a pretty quiet game. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. And then like I went to the Beanpot, the semifinal against BC, and he scored like 2 in the first 5 minutes. I was like, oh, this guy, okay. So what's gonna happen? I'm like, James Hagen's like, whatever. He's gonna have like a 3-point night against BU in the Beanpot Championship. So.
Yes, that's exactly how it's gonna go. I am very interested to see how those kids develop, especially Stiga and Leonard. Obviously the New England guys, but also I would want those guys on my team. I want those guys on my team every time. Big trade though. Mikko Rantanen goes from Colorado to Carolina. Jack Drury and Martin Necas go from Carolina to Colorado. And Chicago is like the third team in the deal. I saw someone put them in the cuck chair on Twitter. I thought that was really funny.
Idiots. What a stupid franchise. The team that has fallen ass backwards into so much fortune, and they're run like shitheads. Unbelievable.
And no one deserves that success less.
Yeah, exactly.
that good fortune less.
They're friggin' buffoons, Evan.
Idiots. They sent Taylor Hall to Carolina. They retained, was it half of Rantanen's salary?
Yeah. Yep.
And they got a 3rd round pick in return.
Yeah. Embarrassing.
3rd round pick. Oof.
I don't even know if it's like worth like literally like using that as a I know we're going to talk about it, but like a scary barometer of like what the trade market is going to be, or is it more just Chicago is run by a bunch of fucking idiots? Because like I don't know how you weaponize that cap space when you look at how many teams are already up against the cap. You take on that contract and move a guy like Hall, who like yes, maybe he's not worth a 1st round pick, right? But can help a team like Carolina.
And you retain salary on a player you didn't get.
Yes, exactly. Yes. For what, half of that contract? So what, like over 4 million is a legit good roster player that you're taking up. And like that's why I look at this and it's like, like does this mean like the Bruins aren't going to get a 1st for Frederick? Probably not. Like I don't think there was ever going to be the case where unless a team just again, well actually now that I think about it, I'm talking myself into it, Evan. I'm like, some team wouldn't be that fucking dumb to give up a 1st round pick for a guy like Frederick who's a free agent and is not playing well. But maybe there's other teams like the Blackhawks who are run by fucking idiots, and maybe they will do that. So
I was gonna say we forget that a lot of teams are run by
fucking dumb.
So. Yeah, it happens quite a bit. That's why I think I saw Steve Conroy tweet out that this is not good news for the Bruins, seeing what the return on Taylor Hall was. And I mean, this is sort of the first big trade of this season, and that can set the market. And I'm sure that teams who are looking to get a guy like Trent Frederick are going to bring this trade up. But I'd have to think the Bruins are smart enough to know, please don't just trade Trent Frederick for a 3rd round pick. Please, get something legitimate. But I am with you. I think this is a unique situation. The trade was unique. It was huge. It's almost like Chicago was like everybody else, just like looking at the Mikko Rantanen for Martin Necas part that they just completely like were like, oh yeah, well, whatever you need, we'll make it happen. Like it's such a special circumstance and unique situation. If it was 1 for 1, if it was just Taylor Hall and to Carolina and Chicago had to retain parts of salaries or something, like it'd be one thing, but I don't know. I don't think this is going to have a huge implication on the trade market given just how weird the trade was.
Yeah. And again, like maybe the market isn't that great. And again, if it was like they just threw Hall in as part of it and they get a 3rd, like don't like it, but okay. Like maybe that is the going rate and the taking up over 4 million in extra cap, bailing these other teams out to get nothing else in return. Because like I refuse to believe that like Taylor Hall was going for a 4th round pick and taking on that contract is what bumped it up to a 3rd or something like that, right? Like I refuse to believe that taking up 4 million is the sweetener needed to move up around when you're also giving up a player who, yes, maybe Taylor Hall is not what he was a few years ago, especially coming off that knee injury, but still is a useful player that a lot of teams would really covet. So
tied with Elias Lindholm in points.
Yeah, like I don't know. I just think that Chicago looks like a bunch of fucking buffoons off of all this. So like I was disgusted. I was pissed off, not even watching the BUBC game and just seeing how much like a team like that, like Chicago, who's fallen ass backwards into so much fortune, then also has a shit ass roster on Connor Bedard still continues to scuffle and bumble their way through more of these things. So now I'm pissed off, Evan, just thinking of the fact that these teams are run by idiots like this, because I'm not putting much stock into it. When Frederick goes for a 4th round pick, then I'll put egg on my face, but I view this
that will not be a good day. That'll be
but
pissed.
I'm not putting too much stock into what clearly seems like Chicago. Maybe they just wanted their names on like the headlines, on the little chyrons and the graphics. They don't get enough of falling ass backwards into Connor Bedard and wasting his probably first 7 years in the NHL because they can't build a fucking roster. But maybe they just want to be on the headline on NHL Network. Say that, and we helped. And we took on this money.
And we were idiots.
There. Idiots. I can't stand that team. Damn it, Evan. I'm pissed now.
I know. To end on this, it's, another interesting trade thing I saw. I forget who it was on NHL Network, and I apologize. It was EJ Radick and someone. It was someone else who said this. It wasn't EJ Radick who said it. It was an analyst for them.
It's like, fuck Chicago. It's like,
no, it wasn't even about that. It was something different. I forget who it was. I don't think they had a name graphic. Because I saw it on Twitter, and this person mentioned how if the Bruins trade Marchand, it would mean they're truly blowing it all up. It would just be over. Like, you'd be, Pastrnak would be pissed, and you'd be into a real rebuild. I don't agree with that. Pastrnak might be pissed. I think Pastrnak would rightly be pissed if Brad Marchand was traded. Realistically, on paper, though, if you traded Brad Marchand, I don't think you're headed into a rebuild. I think that is a damn retool. I mean, that is like a by the book retool.
Yes.
But like rebuild, not in the playoffs for the next 3 to 4 years, I disagree with. I think you, and I'm not advocating for trading Marchand. I will talk about it every chance I get, but I'm not saying you to do it. But I don't think it's a rebuild if you traded him. But
Yeah, no, I agree. Like,
now I've got everybody else pissed.
No, I do think, there's a difference between like completely blowing things up and taking a hard look at this team and shaking things up. And I don't listen, every player, I think, like these guys, the way they're wired, how competitive they are, like Brad Marchand, I think till the day the Bruins get bounced out of a playoff, I think, like, I'm not even saying this as a joke or something. I think he fully believes that every team he's on has the will and the ability to claw back from deficits and do these things. So, like,
and he better believe that.
So
one
I
in
think
a million mindset.
So there's going to be a disappointment. However, even if it's a small retool or you're selling off a guy like Frederick, I'm sure guys are like, what the fuck? Like, we still got a good team here. We still got a lot of belief, got a lot of resiliency. Like, you moving guys? Like, that's every locker room, every athlete, the way they're wired. So, like, that is not anything different. But yeah, there's a big difference, I think, between a retool and like moving pillars of this team off the roster and just for draft capital. If you're swapping, you're switching things up and you're getting JT Miller, but you're moving out roster players as a result, that's the price of doing business. That's when the next day, when you talk about it, like guys they move, it's it's the NHL, it's a business, it sucks, but we decided to bring in a guy like JT. If you bring in just draft picks, then it's when people are like,
yes,
okay,
don't know about that one.
Is this guy going to help us in the next 4 or 5 years? Like, you have that, but that's any sport, any locker room, anything like that.
It's true. So yeah, interesting time with trades and things like that. And now we have our first big trade to go off of. So
yeah,
if Hall's getting a third,
if you're the Bruins, like, hopefully you make another trade with Chicago. Maybe you will get Bedard for a second.
That's right. Trent Frederick for Connor Bedard straight up. Who says no? I wonder if we do have to ask, like, what is Frederick worth? If we're gonna go by that trade and Taylor Hall is worth a third rounder, I guess Frederick would also be worth like a third rounder. Similar points. Frederick is younger. You have the chance to re-sign him. Teams apparently really want him. Physical.
I think people like just the skill set he brings. Again, I look at what Jeannot was like. If that's what you think that he can be, not saying you're going to get that same, because when that trade went down, I think everyone was like, "The hell is this?" Like, that was a pretty crazy return. Maybe not getting that, but I think players with that, skill set that is so unique in today's NHL, that does boost their value quite a bit. That even if the numbers aren't there, what Frederick can do when he's on and dialed in, same with a guy like Jeannot, not a lot of guys can do that. So that's why Team Pride are going to pay a premium. Is that going to mean a first? Maybe not if you're like Chicago or someone like that, but you'd think at least a second, I would imagine. But we'll see.
You have to be a second. And that, to me, I think is logical. Like, what I see them doing, what I ultimately see them doing at the deadline is what we talked about earlier. You trade Trent Frederick to get back in the second round. So you're picking in the second round this year. So you've got a first, second, and a third round pick. And then I don't know if I see them doing much else, like buying or selling, because you start to sell more and that hinders your chance at a playoff spot. Frederick has not been producing much. I mean, he's got 3 points, I think, so far in January. I think he had 4 in December. So, like, you could bring up Georgi Merkulov and have him center that third line. Like, that's doable. And Merkulov's earned it, by the way. Merkulov, it is crazy that he's not up here. I don't understand that at all. But to me, I think that's like the safe move. You trade Frederick for like a second round pick. You get back in the second round. You bring Merkulov up. You have him be the third line center. I think that is like the most likely thing that they do, given what they've done in the past and given what this roster is showing for the future. Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we're going to have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season with recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that stuff over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky, Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.